Can you recall when you first heard or saw a band with the very not West German name Lokomotive Kreuzberg?
Yeah, you know what? I never saw them because I wasn't interested in them. So they were very famous in Berlin because they were, you know, they did rock theater, and they did it very specifically for, you know, apprentices, you know, people, young people who were learning a craft, and they were organized in unions like the IG Metall. So they actually got subsidies from the IG Metall, but they were real communists, like East German style communists in West Berlin. There was the Sozialistische Einheitspartei West-Berlins. They were members, and they were trained, they did agitation, they did the whole shebang. And of course, Country Bumpkin from West Germany, completely apolitical, you know, so I didn't even understand the first thing about it. And then I met them, and they were in the process to actually make a band with the most famous dissident from that scene, from the political system that they were supporting all these years. So it was...
I mean, that's definitely worth reading up on, because it is probably a little too complex of how both the West and the East try to infiltrate cultural and creative scenes on both sides and try to finance more or less openly certain individuals in order to get their particular messages across.
Yeah, I don't know if I would just call it like that, because there's also opportunism. Musicians are by nature somehow also opportunists. So Wolf Biermann, who was a Hamburg-born guy who was a communist who had deliberately gone to East Germany to live there as a communist, and he was a singer-songwriter, and he wrote critical songs. So of course he wrote critical songs about the GDR system. He wasn't afraid. So eventually they silenced him, and he had to deal with a West German record company. I don't think there was any specific undermining strategy going on. So of course he was happy to sell a shit ton of records in West Germany. So he had a very privileged status in East Berlin. At some point, since he couldn't perform in East Germany because they didn't let him anymore, he did a big tour in West Germany, and they didn't let him come back. So he was the first big dissident, and then a whole bunch of East German artists, you know, directors, writers, actors, musicians, signed a letter in solidarity with Wolf Biermann, and then the Stasi went to their homes and put them under pressure and said, you have a privileged status here. If you want to continue having that, then you have to withdraw your signature from this letter. And about 50% did, and the other 50% left for the West. So there was a huge cultural brain drain of the GDR into West Germany, and a lot of them actually made it pretty well in West Germany, and others completely withered away. It was a very sad story. And Nina was, because she was the stepdaughter of Wolf Biermann, was of course among the people who left. So in 1976, she came to West Berlin. She immediately, through her stepfather, had a connection to CBS Records in Frankfurt. They gave her a record deal and sent her to London and said, look, there's stuff going on in London. It was punk. It was the birth of punk, and she was literally hanging out with the Sex Pistols. And there was a girl group, the Slits, who was like in the whole scene with the Sex Pistols. She hung out there for 6 months, but she couldn't find musicians for a band that she could then go home and record with. So she came back to Berlin, and she met this guy from the Lok Kreuzberg, from that political East German communist, basically, band in West Berlin. So it's really super ironic when you think about it. And I knew that guy, and so he asked me, and I was still going to the music academy, and I said, I can't do it, I need to first graduate. So I was that straight-laced and really kind of, well, yeah, it's an opportunity. I kind of like CBS Records. There's a lot of my favorite records came out on that label. You know, that was an issue for me, like, you know, Bitches Brew, for instance. It's on CBS Records. A whole bunch of things that are absolutely amazing because it's one of the big record companies. So, yeah, 2 weeks later, he called me again and said...
Who is this he?
this is Potsch, the guitar player of the Nina Hagen Band, who used to be with Lokomotive Kreuzberg. And he says, we tried 2 other keyboard players. We think that you have to come, you have to meet everybody, and you have to go to the rehearsal room with us. And that's what I did, and I couldn't help it. I had to join that band. It was just too good an energy. I'd never experienced anything like that. The drummer was just unbelievable, the kind of energy that he has as a drummer. And
his name was?
Herwig Mitteregger. He's still a really good friend of mine. We had not that much to do with each other in the last 30 years, but we're still good friends. So, so all of a sudden I had a professional record deal and I was still going to the music academy. So I went from the Bahnhof Zoo to Kreuzberg. Paulinkeufer, by the way, Paulinkeufer used to be a shithole with rehearsal rooms. Now, probably in that same rehearsal room that we were in 1977, 78, there's probably some banker now in a fancy apartment.
And there was Hardwax Records in between, and all these things that were important for it.
Paulinkeufer was great. I would totally move there now. So anyway, I don't know.
Maybe to give people an idea, there's this fantastic little video that shows different iterations of Nina and the band in a short clip.
Oh, that's good.
Maybe can we see the first 2 or 3 minutes of video number 1, please? Well, there's a bit of variety in that material.
Yeah, I mean, you've asked yourself, where was I? I was not in the picture anywhere. And actually, I was audible only in one of those little snippets. So there were 3 snippets from when she was a pop star in the GDR. And then there was our, the first piece on this album called TV Glotze, which was actually a cover version of a piece by the Tubes, who nobody is aware of anymore, I don't think.
Is there, I mean, that song in particular has a lot of drama in itself.
Yeah.
Is it worth playing it from the record?
Yeah, I have, because I saw that they have vinyl players here, so I thought, okay, let me dig through my archives, which are in boxes in my garage, of course. This is a Japanese pressing, and they were supposedly better. I'm not sure if it's really that much better.
I mean, now that you play it, it's going to be worth only half of it now. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a virgin pressing. I don't think I've ever played this. So this is about 40 years old, maybe 38 or something. And it's that very record. And
maybe before we listen to it, there's different stages in that song. And as you were involved in the way it was created, can you probably give a few pointers to what happens in it? Because that...
You mean in the lyrics?
In both the lyrics and the way the song evolves.
The song structure is really exactly what's in the Tubes piece. And the Tubes piece is called White Punks on Dope. So it has lyrically nothing to do with it, which is always, by the way, the best way to deal with a cover version. Just write an original version in the other language, because you will never get anything musical if you try to actually get the meaning across. We'll come to that.
We might, yes.
We might come to that. All right. So Nina, of course, just wrote her version of what it is like for an East German to come to West Germany and see what's going on television. So it's all colorful, it's overwhelming in terms of the amount of stimulants that are coming down on you as an innocent East German. And I think that's basically what the song is about. So Ich glotz TV, I watch television and I switch through the channels.
But Klotz is stronger, it's
Glotzen is
leering,
stare,
staring, leering, somewhere along those lines. It's definitely the kind of thing that parents and grandparents would say to you when they would want you to stop watching that evil machine.
Right, it's basically the equivalent of the iPhone now, just stop staring at the screen. Quite harmless. You know what, I actually have this thing and I haven't operated it in a few weeks. Wait. Let's do it properly. No, of course not. There you go.
So there's bits in there that any German over 25 would remember, and the rest that they wouldn't. But there's also, I want to say, at least 5 or 6 decades of pop music in that song. It starts super, I don't want to call it classical, but it really draws from blues and boogie woogie and that kind of stuff. And then it gets into, all of a sudden, punk happens. And then
jazz rock happens.
Then jazz rock happens. Then it somehow preempts nu metal. And then it almost preempts like massive rave anthems. There's like everything in there in like a short amount of time.
Yeah, we were not aware of any of that, of course. That's always the nice thing. You just got to be innocent about what you're doing. You just do it for the fun of it. Seriously. The most memorable things that I was ever involved with have a background of complete innocence and fun, playfulness, and not thinking about money, not thinking about success. Yeah, thinking about groupies, but maybe in the far distance future. But, you know, so seriously, and I have been involved in projects where the people said, wait, we have to make another record because we need to pay our taxes. We didn't know we had to pay so much taxes. I said, well, I told you you had to pay a lot of taxes for your incredible income that you're making with your super hit. And then they go like, yeah, but we have to make a record. And we're like, but you're not ready to make a record. And they made the record anyway. So, and then it wasn't successful, and then he couldn't pay their taxes anyway. Anyway, so what I'm saying,
he's basically saying whatever comes in, put a certain portion aside.
Put it aside for sure, and put something else aside for the uncertain future, or maybe don't, because there won't be any now. Punk was always about no future. Now, what the hell, right? So. Yeah, so I think that's really what that was. It was having an amazing band to play with. You know, this is absolute energy where there was no click track. You know, there was no computer involved. I was able to afford synthesizers. You know, all my money went into synthesizers.
Which ones did you use on there?
My first one was my Mini Moog. I still have that. And then for this particular band, I bought a Yamaha CS80, which was just fresh at the time.
Okay, advances were good then.
That was, yeah. The other people needed to live from their advances, but I was still in school, and my dad supported me. And actually, my mom supported me. My mom gave me 5,000 Deutschmarks for that CS80 that I still have, of course.
Okay, I was going to make a really bad Berlin hip-hop joke about your mom giving you the money for the synth, but fucking hell, 5,000 Deutschmarks for a CS80?
No, the CS80 was 13. So I got my advance, that was 3. I had saved up 5, and my mom gave me 5.
And how did you pay the 5 people to move the machine?
Yeah, no, I think I got a bad back in the context, because, you know, we then had to leave the Paulinke-Ufer, so there was no more elevators, and we had a rehearsal room at the Theater des Westens on the 3rd floor. That was shitty.
So you took the CS80 out and on tour?
Yeah. Okay. And then when we went on tour, of course, we had roadies, so that was good.
Yeah, but how many times did you have to repair the chips on it then?
It only got an overhaul once in '96. Yamaha was nice enough to, because I told them I was going to emigrate to the States, and then they called me and said, "Send us your CS80." I'm going, "Why?" "Just send it." So I sent it, and they sent it back, and it was all fresh. It was beautiful.
Okay, so you're the one that's responsible that there's no replacement chips around anymore.
No, that's not true. Actually, there is one guy, and I just found him. I'm so happy. It's just a half-hour drive away from me. He has easily, at any given time, he has about 10 CS80s sitting in his workshop, and he's making them good again. And so I have no idea. I mean, the density of CS80s in Los Angeles must be amazing.
I mean, on that little nerd deviation there, the machine is known for Vangelis mostly, I guess,
yeah.
And what other things?
Yeah, I don't know. For me, of course, because I played it like nobody else played it.
All right.
Sorry, it's true.
So did you schlep it into Hanza Studios as well?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I schlepped it into the Quasimodo even when I was still playing with my jazz rock band on the side, because that was conveniently just down from the third floor of the Theater des Westens into the basement of the Quasimodo. So yeah, I got a bad back in this context for sure.
Maybe the bad back was also due to the performances, because the backing band somehow had its own life pretty soon.
Yeah, Nina left us. This is why I'm only in one of those snippets, because we had a run starting in the summer of '77. Started rehearsing. Our first gig was in February '78. Then we produced a record. We did a tour when the record was out in the fall of '78. We did another tour all the way through Europe in the spring of '79. And on that tour, or right after that tour, Nina left the band. So that was it. It was just under 2 years. And then I graduated from the academy like 4 weeks later, which was very traumatic, the whole thing, just to go through all of that. And then we were sitting there as a backing band of an amazing front person. And we were super traumatized by the fact that everybody just wanted her. And there was this petty jealousy in the band of her. And you go like, looking back, you go like, how could you be jealous? Why aren't you just happy that you're standing behind her and that you're part of the project? So, but you know.
But there's rumors she also made it a little harder for you to be happy by claiming a pretty strong part of the shares for her.
Well, actually, it wasn't really like that, because originally we actually formed a company and we were equal shareholders, and the only way she got more was because she wrote more music and she wrote pretty much all the lyrics. So she got a much higher share from the back end, but that was very justified through the creative work, and we had a publishing company together. So the publishing share was our socialist contribution it went into, and I think this is still a good model. I actually came up with that model because I learned something about copyrights and publishing rights, and I said, well, we should have the capitalist competitiveness that whoever writes the best pieces, and the most of them, gets more money, but there should be a socialist aspect to it. I still believe in this kind of combination, by the way, so I'm very much anti, neocon economy that started with Miss Thatcher and Mr. Reagan and is now about to drag us all down. So I'm also not communist. I'm not pro-communism, because I really don't think that worked very well. But this kind of interesting mixture between, having an incentive to actually contribute something and at the same time being taken care of is nice.
So the tragical state of social democracy in the Western world is probably our lunch.
Well, I don't know. I think it wouldn't be so tragic if the Social Democrats would remember why they exist, right? So, but let's not get into politics. I don't know. But this politics kind of went into this business model, so to speak. So we were a company. We shared the royalties. She got a little more, and of course that wasn't really enough. And interesting enough, Wolf Biermann was the guy who was saying, hey, Nina, we are in capitalism. Don't behave like we're still in the GDR. So that was one of the things. The other thing was that Frank Zappa's manager at the time was Bennett Glotzer, and he had an eye on her, so he kind of helped undermine the band. There were drugs involved and all kinds of things.
Added suit?
There's a scene in the movie called The Doors, which is the story of the Doors. There are two lawyer types who take what's his face aside and talk to Jim Morrison. Sorry about my Alzheimer, and they talk to him and say, it's not about the band, it's about you, man. You should go solo. And I think that's exactly what happened there. So then she went solo, and she went really downhill because she just randomly took musicians, and then she kind of stabilized and had to deal with CBS in America and had a pretty good run.
How many albums did you guys record with her?
2. So we recorded this first album in Hanza, and then the second album, we already had it composed and arranged and rehearsed and tried out on this European tour in the spring of 1979. And then she left the band, and then of course we had negotiations about how to separate, because we had contracts. Luckily, we actually had contracts, because otherwise we would have just been dismissed by the record company, by her, by the management, and so on and so on. So we had a bit of a negotiation, a strong position of negotiating. We could have blocked her for many years. Of course, we didn't want to do that. But we said we want to get something out of it. So what we got out of it was the publishing rights and the fact that we actually did record that second album. And this was after we were already sort of hating each other in public. We recorded an album, and the plan was that we were going to record the backing tracks at the Hanza Studios here in Berlin, and that she was going to sing in Stockholm at the ABBA Studios without us being present. And at the last second, she changed her mind, and she came to the Hanza Studios. And we had actually a really interesting week with her in the studios. And it was sort of the beginning of my career as a producer, because I wasn't her ex-boyfriend. That was Mane, our bass player. So there was
Mane Preker.
Mane Preker. It was a bit of a problematic situation. And I was the one who studied music production, more like on the classical side, but so I was like super interested to produce her vocals, and I did that. And I kind of learned how to do it, you know, and of course I had the experience of 1.5 years in the band, that if you wanted to contribute an idea, you don't go and say, I have an idea, and it is blah, 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 blah. You just say it surreptitiously, and you float it, and then when she says, hey, why don't we do this? You go like, awesome. So this is like one, you know, it's one thing to deal with narcissists, problematic personalities. If you want the situation to function, of course, the other thing would be to say, you're a narcissist, let me just walk away from you, because that's what you do with narcissists usually. But unfortunately, we're in the entertainment industry, so we have to deal with narcissists. And if we're not a narcissist ourselves, then we are an enabler, automatically. And the more aware we are of that, the better. You know, just at least understand what the situation is psychologically. So that was a very, very interesting learning experience. And there was this guy, Edu Meyer, who was one of the Hanza's engineers who had worked on all the Bowie albums. He wasn't intimately involved in the production, but he came and he lived out in Britz, which is not far from here on the other side, and he had the homegrown marijuana. That was just the best stuff. It was like champagne. It was amazing. I'm not much of a marijuana guy, but this was so good, and it actually helped us go through that week. So should we play African reggae maybe from that album? No?
Maybe, I mean, considering we're already 40 minutes in, it's like, yeah, but African reggae would be the one to look for right now. I would like to, while you probably tell us one or two things about the historical importance or significance of Hanza Studios, have you tell us a little bit more? Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, maybe let's get a quick idea of it then.
No, we can talk about it. Hanza Studios was in this old ballroom at the wall, and like looking out at the wall, and at Potsdamer Platz, where you cannot imagine how it looks unless you look at photos. It was this beautiful old turn-of-the-century building that was the only one of its kind, and there was basically no man's land around it. Here was the wall, and then there was more no man's land, and there was the second wall, and you could see Hitler's bunker. There was this little hill in the no man's land that had been Hitler's bunker. And when you walked onto the platforms that on the western side, you could overlook this situation, and sometimes you would just stand there during the day and go like, why is this like moving? And you realize there were hundreds and hundreds of rabbits, because they didn't have any natural enemies, and they weren't heavy enough to trigger the mines, the landmines that were in the
death strip.
In the death strip. So yeah, that was kind of interesting.
But on a more uplifting musical side, what were the things that were recorded in there?
Yeah, well, the Berlin trilogy of David Bowie's mainly, and then a whole bunch. I really don't have an encyclopedic memory of what was recorded
like
there.
Udo Jürgens, Frank Zander, Depeche Mode.
Oh, for sure. Depeche Mode later, yes, in the 80s. All the really, really good Depeche Mode stuff. Construction Time Again, one of my all-time favorite albums, actually. Really good, was produced there. And yeah, it had this big hall. It wasn't particularly suitable for recording, and perversely, because it was still the 70s, they had all these walls blocking off so that it wasn't, that the ambience of the room wasn't so prominently featured. Until we did the second album, when we said, hey, let's put the drums on the stage and record the room. So we kind of insisted on that. The Hanza guys weren't interested. They wanted the dry 70s sound. So anyway, this is then African reggae. So this is from that second album that we recorded at Hanza Studios, and with her not there, but then coming and recording the vocals. And the vocals are really, really chaotic. There's a shit ton of stuff that you don't hear that we had to sort through at the end. It's very, very improvisational. And unfortunately, it's also a long piece.